and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of HIAC Wrestling Podcast. I got to make that memo to tell everybody that is the HIAC Wrestling Podcast, not HIAC Talk Radio. My apologies. First of all, I advertised Joe Gacy, and Joe Gacy is a very busy man, so I will get him on the show in the next couple weeks because I do want everybody to know about Sideshow Pro coming back in Voorhees, New Jersey. So please, before we have him on, do your research. Look up Sideshow Pro coming out. What month are we in? Yeah, September 27th. I got it. I remember. Good start so far, Dan. All right, great. Thanks. Look up Sideshow Pro. I'm very excited about it, and that's why I want to get him on. Also, I want to talk to him about, he was part of this whole Evolve show that was on some WWE network or something recently. But also, I think Joe Gacy is legitimately one of the greatest unsigned talents as far as WWE or AEW or anybody on TV, Impact Wrestling, that's not signed right now, and they're crazy for not signing him. But that's just my opinion. So we'll get him on soon. But check out Sideshow Pro nonetheless. I'm the above average comedian Dan Calachico. Follow me on Twitter at Dan83. Craig Lagans. I know we're not supposed to do intros, but do it real quick since I did mine. It would be unfair of me to not let you do yours.
Oh, hello, Daniel. Thank you for having me on your fine wrestling podcast. My name is Craig Lagans, and I will be your co-host this week without my trusty sidekick, Amber.
Oh, that's okay. She's there. She's just she's not bothering with you right now.
Yes, she has a prior engagement, and she does have a no-compete clause, so she's not going to be on another podcast. That I can guarantee you.
No. The only one she could appear on is Comic Book Gurus at WMMR.com and all the other fine WMMR podcasts. See how I did that? See, Roscoe also doesn't care. He's here, but he doesn't. He has a no appearance clause on any damn thing. He does not care. We got a few things to talk about this week, including I want to go outside of the wrestling realm for a second because we were laughing off air about this, but I just want to talk about how funny I thought it was that Mike Scott had to beat up 3 dumpy-looking white guys in the parking lot of the Sixers game. I thought that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Funny on that end that anybody rolled up to a 6'7", 250-pound, maybe more. Not sure how big he is, but he's a big guy. And it's so sad that the guys that look like idiots because they were being racist to Mike Scott for wearing a Redskins jersey because they're stupid and dumpy white looking folk, that they won't be coming to the tailgates anymore, which just opened up room for other people. Aw, I did think it was funny that they thought they were going to take him. I like that little guy, that little bald F head that got that little sucker punch in. Mike Scott was like,
A little background for our international listeners who aren't familiar with what happened over the weekend. Mike Scott is a basketball player for my favorite team, the local team, the Philadelphia 76ers. Mike Scott is 6'9", 248 pounds, an in-shape young man under 30 years old who is a professional athlete. Now, Mike Scott, for those of you who aren't familiar with him, was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers earlier this year. He just re-signed his contract here. He came here as a free agent. He re-signed his contract here. And since then, he has ingratiated himself with the city of Philadelphia. He's took it upon himself by himself to hand out ice cream at the art museum. He's given upwards of $10,000 to a local Pee Wee football team. He's shown up at a high school basketball practice. He showed up at a person's wedding just because they invited him to. So Mike Scott is a man of the people of Philadelphia. So he's already been people have gotten Mike Scott tattoos. They call the name of his group, his fan club, the Hive. There have been Mike Scott Hive tattoos that Philadelphians have gotten in honor of Mike Scott, a person who's only played in Philadelphia for 25 games, but has already signed a 2-year contract. So Mike Scott is a man of the people in Philadelphia so far. Mike Scott, though, was born in Silver Springs, Maryland. So he is a very proud Washington Redskins fan. He has made no secret of that. Earlier this week, before the Philadelphia Eagles took on the Washington Redskins, Mike Scott, who was very active on social media, both Instagram and Twitter, said that he was going to attend an Eagles tailgate party wearing his Washington Redskins jersey because he's a proud Washington Redskins fan. To his credit, he said what he was going to do. To certain Philadelphia fans' credit, they warned Mike Scott, Mike, we love you, but be careful. There are some of us that are jerks, so they might say something to you or give you a hard time. Mike Scott never wanted to back down, and because for those of you who don't know about Mike Scott as a player in the NBA, he's what's known as an enforcer. Someone who will take the hard foul. During certain games in the past season, when someone got into another one of the Sixers' face, it was Mike Scott who got in that guy's face. He wasn't even part of the fight, but he got into it because that's who Mike Scott is. He's an enforcer.
Because he ain't no bitch.
Because he ain't no bitch. Okay? So that's who Mike Scott is. So when fans were warning him about coming to an Eagles tailgate party with a Redskins jersey on, he said, fine. And even mockingly said, what are they going to do? And even Mike Scott even joked, I got money, so if there is a bail, I can pay my own bail. But still, Mike Scott not anticipating any problems because, again, man of the people. So in the video, which has been taken down but still has gone viral, Mike Scott went to a tailgate club, this Philadelphia tailgating club. They have their own name, that I won't mention. But there was a coffin there, I guess because they were burying the Redskins. A nickname that Eagles fans have for Redskins is the Deadskins. Okay? And I from what I understand, I still don't know this 100%. One of the names on the coffin was Sean Taylor, who was a Washington Redskin who tragically died at 23 years old, well into his prime, because of a home break-in. That's incredibly bad taste anyway, in any way, shape, or form, even if you weren't an Eagles fan. For what I understand, Mike Scott didn't like that, or even if it was that, or if it was just Mike Scott wearing a Redskins jersey. Let's start what prompted them trash talking Mike Scott. Mike Scott, again, professional athlete, hears it all the time from at least 20,000 people anytime he goes to work on the road. So trash talking is nothing to Mike Scott. What may or may not have happened, I'm leaning towards the may, was a racial slur.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards probably.
I'm leaning towards probably too, which is unfortunately in this day and age, and what any black athlete has to deal with is on the road or wearing an opposing team's colors, you suck, but there's always the possibility of you suck plus racial slur. And we're going to assume this happened. These 5 overweight men of a different color decided to try Mike Scott. And Mike Scott, if we hadn't mentioned earlier, is all of 6'9" and 250 pounds. Even if he wasn't Mike Scott, this man is 6'9" and 250 pounds. So why are you swinging on him anyway? If I saw a man 6'9", 250 pounds wearing a ball gown and tiara, I'd say, you know what, son? You have that. That's all you.
It's all you, buddy. Enjoy that.
I have absolutely nothing to say to you because you're 6'9" and 250 pounds. But pure muscles, I'm in Philly, you're wearing a Redskins jersey, let's see how far I can take this. They swung on Mike Scott. Mike Scott dispatched them. One of my favorite tweets was from Chris Long, former Philadelphia Eagle, who said, my money's on Mike Scott. Protect Mike Scott. Don't attack Mike Scott. And I would have loved to see Mike Scott against all 5 of you in a fair one because my money's still on Mike Scott.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, even 5-on-1.
Not to defend these guys because I don't care. Because I almost named them. Never mind. But from what I've heard, that there was no name on the coffin. It was a coffin with a shirt draped across it that said something about 1991. So they were mourning the death of the Redskins being a champions.
Got it.
And Deadskins is a better name than I have for it's a better name than what I have for the Washington Redskins football team, which is racist F-heads. The Washington racist F-heads. But still, that's no excuse. These guys then played the professional victims of, well, we're not going to come to the tailgate anymore. And there was a collective, oh, no. I encourage Eagles fans out there everywhere to follow the mighty E-Rock. Yes. Who is a great Twitter account. He writes for the 700 Club on Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia. Excuse me, NBC Sports Philadelphia. My bad. And he had a great video on Twitter because he's like, I can't wait until the podcast, which is 4th and John, which also just start there with a great name. But he also wrote a great article that's at 4th and John and at the 700 Club right now. Just be like, anybody who's placing the blame at Mike Scott's feet, that's not how that works. Like, there's no law. The law is not, you can't wear, that's not how law works. That's not how rule works. You got to stop with this, yo, Phil, you can't wear another jersey there. Because if that was anybody I would have known, I would have thrown down with him. It's just, that's not how it works.
Exactly. And E-Rock is a fellow authentic sports fan with me. Our commercials run concurrently together. But he made a great point about Mike Trout, who plays for the Anaheim Angels, who is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. If Mike Trout went to a LA Rams game wearing an Eagles jersey and someone took a swing at him, we'd all be outraged. How dare you? And so the exact same thing happened here. Yeah. And I always go by this analogy whenever I hear anyone blaming a victim or he should have known better, whatever. If you have a Maserati, brand new spanking new Maserati, and you park it in the worst neighborhood on earth, is it right for someone to steal it? Does it still make it right for someone to steal it? No. So if he wears an opposing jersey, it's still not right for anyone to give him a hard time or to take a swing at him. So there's no victim blaming here. There's no Mike Scott should have. Mike Scott didn't have to do anything. He said where he was going, what he was going to wear.
Yeah.
So I don't know why this was. Yeah.
I can tell you why. I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, but I'll tell you why. They were white, and he was black. Yes. Sometimes you just got to call it. Sometimes you just got to say, well, there's smoke. That must be fire. I was going to say call a spade, but you can't really say that either. No.
You're right, but if T.J. McConnell had walked in wearing a Redskins jersey, no one would have. They would have just trash talked him, but no one would have swung on him.
No, and you know what's going to happen to Mike Scott? Not a goddamn thing.
Nope.
Not a thing. Thank you for being. Go ahead, finish.
If anything, he'll be cheered more. If anything, I mean, what he did was the most Philly thing that a Washington Redskins fan has ever done.
Yep, pretty much. Well, thank you for your patience, folks. We had to talk about it being both from the Philly area. We had to address that because that's a great story. I thought that was hilarious in that way. Like these guys, I tweeted because he was hanging out with Alex McIntyre, who takes pictures and works for NBC Sports. And I replied to her tweet saying, who the F thought it was a great idea to jump that guy in the parking lot? And some other fellow Eagles fan was like, well, in the mood I'm in, I'd hit him too. And I said, son, you wouldn't have done a damn thing. You would have kept your mouth shut. You would have sat there and you would have taken it. Grow up, be an adult. I'd swing on Mike Scott too. No,
you wouldn't. You'd swing at him in the privacy of your own home behind a keyboard.
Yes, but you just did.
Yeah. And again, going back to the character of Mike Scott, he stayed in the parking lot and he went and took pictures with fans
Good.
just like he always has and stayed for the whole game. So again, that little scrum didn't deter him, and it certainly didn't say, "Well, I'm no longer a Eagles fan, a Phillies fan," or anything. He stayed, he did what Mike Scott does, which was meet and greet fans, get pictures taken, sign autographs, shake hands, kiss babies, all that stuff. So Mike Scott was doing Mike Scott things. So I'm embarrassed. I'm offended. Philly fans don't need more of this crap. Um, I want to curse because it did bother me. It still does bother me that such a thing happens in this day and age, especially to a Philadelphia athlete who's made such great strides. And people don't come here from other teams and act like this, okay?
Yep.
And embrace the city the way he has. Okay, Iverson, who was a guy here, has never hasn't done half the things Mike Scott has done in 3 months than Iverson did here in 12 years. Okay, and Iverson still considers himself a Philadelphia. Mike Scott has done more for the team, for love the city more than anyone else. So for this to happen to him is an embarrassment. I'm a Philadelphia sports fan, an authentic sports fan, and it's an embarrassment. I'm glad we have the forum to talk about it, Dan. Thank you for bringing it up. I apologize to our fans of this wrestling podcast, but I just thought this was something that needed to be addressed because, like you said, Dan, it was damn funny.
You know what? It was almost a wrestling match. There, I worked it in. Thank you. You know what? Since I worked you up into this tizzy, why don't you take over and do wrestling historian now, and then we'll end talking about how the Raw ratings and Steve Austin and all the other good stuff we mentioned off air. The show is yours.
Well, thank you, Daniel.
Please lift the camera so we can see your face, Mr. Legons. We can't see it. Okay, there you go. That'll do.
As the effects on your computer that you're watching on, you clearly can see we're going back in time to a period of time when titles were called belts, where territories existed, where wrestling organizations often joined as one, and when sports entertainment was called professional wrestling. Reputations are made just from one thing, and that can carry a wrestler throughout their entire career. I made mention of something that happened last month with August 9th, 1980, when Larry Zbyszko took on Bruno Sammartino in a cage, and that match that carried Larry Zbyszko for the rest of his career being a heel just from his feud with Bruno. Well, on September 7th, 1977, Greg Valentine defeated Wahoo McDaniel for the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. During that match, Wahoo may have accidentally or actually had a bone broke in his leg, and
Okay.
it was one of the Valentine grabbed it and went back and broke Wahoo's leg. Whether that was kayfabe or whether Wahoo legitimately broke a bone in his leg, Wahoo's leg was broken. Greg Valentine became the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, and his reputation began. He had a custom-made shirt with "I broke Wahoo's leg" on it that is now iconic in the Carolinas. And when he became the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, it solidified his career as a heel after that. Because at that time, Greg Valentine was a face in Florida. He actually teamed up with Dusty Rhodes in Florida. But when he broke Wahoo McDaniel's leg, this was back in territories where you can be a face in one territory and a heel somewhere else. After Greg Valentine broke Wahoo McDaniel's leg and became the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, he became a main event superstar and the top heel in the company next to Ric Flair. Valentine would then go on to the WWF, where he would break, quote, Chief Jay Strongbow's leg with his figure four. So he got the reputation of being a leg breaker. I don't know why it had to be up against Native American wrestlers, but whatever. That that reputation of Greg Valentine breaking legs started with Wahoo McDaniel and continued throughout his career. But that's what made September 7th, 1977, him defeating Wahoo McDaniel and breaking his leg started the heel career and the main event career of Greg Valentine. On that same date, September 7th, 1986, Dan, was the television debut of WWF Wrestling Challenge.
Oh, wow.
One of my favorite Saturday afternoon wrestling shows, and it started September 7th, 1986, with his premiere. I believe the British Bulldogs wrestled Demolition, but one of my little known matches, one of the matches that took place during that TV taping was Paul Orndorff defeated Troy Martin in that show. Troy Martin, who you now know as Shane Douglas.
Oh. Gotcha.
But
Right.
September 7th, 1986, Paul Orndorff and Troy Martin were part of the premiere episode of WWF Wrestling Challenge. September 8th, 1991, in a just under the wire decision. September 8th, 1991, the NWA officially stripped Ric Flair of the NWA Heavyweight Championship the day before he would make his WWF debut. They had taken the title off of Rick a month earlier, but this was the WCW did, but this is the NWA actually stripping Flair of their version of the World Championship, and this would start the splinter effect of the NWA and WCW. And at the time, there was an NWA champion and a WCW heavyweight champion. The NWA belt, I believe, would be held in a tournament, and Masahiro Chono would defeat Rick Rude in the finals of that. Later on, I think a year or so from now, the WCW, obviously heavyweight championship, would go on, would continue the lineage, but the stripping of Ric Flair of the NWA title would splinter the NWA and WCW, but it would happen the day before Ric Flair would debut in the WWF. But the NWA stripping Ric Flair, that would be the last time Ric Flair would ever hold the NWA Heavyweight Championship.
Wow.
Yep. And he never lost it in the ring. But thank you, Jim Herd. Also, September 8th, happy belated 55th birthday to Scotty Flamingo. I'm sorry, Scotty the Body. I'm sorry, Scott Anthony. Sorry, Johnny Polo. Sorry, Raven. Scott Levy turned 55 on September 8th. Happy birthday to Scott Levy.
Boy. I got nothing.
Yeah. Man of many names, but he created one of the great characters in professional wrestling history.
I will say this. I do think it's just crazy that after the names you just mentioned, I mean, he was a world-class WWF, WCW, back and forth, and all these crappy gimmicks. And he made Raven stick for the last 20 years. After all that, he was like, I got this. And I just recently, last month, so I found a list on Reddit. This is, I'm not ADD and I'm staying on track here. I found a Reddit page that literally took every single solitary show that's on the WWE network and put it in chronological order. All of them. And whatever, doesn't matter what company it is there. And I'm in 96, and when I found this list, I'm like, I'm going to add the ECW show, Hardcore TV, back to it, because a lot of that I have not seen in years. And we're in the midst, we just finished up with Raven thinking that Beulah's baby was his, and it wasn't. And then the next week, somebody I forgot who exposed it, or Shane Douglas tried to expose that there was another woman involved with her, and it was "Come On, I Want to Lay." Stupid name. That's so stupid. So I just ended with Tommy Dreamer leaving with both of them. But Raven is all over that show. Raven and Shane Douglas was dominating 1996 as far as ECW, and it's crazy to see how influential years later. I mean, he carried that all the way through, right in from ECW to WCW to WWF, right on into TNA. Same character, one of the best matches. People, it's hot. There's 50-50. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people like it. The Clockwork Orange match carried it right through. After all that, Raven finally stuck. I like to see it. He's not a bad guy. He's a nice guy. It's not that he doesn't want to be there. He just knows, because he's a Mensa level guy, that there's not a lot he could say to anybody in the room, you know?
And well, he was such an interesting character, and he's very truthful. And somebody asked him even a long time ago, after he stopped wrestling, why didn't you ever wrestle as when you were Johnny Polo in WWF? And he was very honest. He said, because I stopped taking steroids. I was, barely 200 pounds. I wasn't in shape. He and Shane McMahon were like tight, because he would spend more time in the front office than he ever did, and more so than he was on the road, being the manager of the Quebecers and doing other commentary. I mean, it was Johnny Polo that interviewed Burt Reynolds at ringside at Madison Square Garden at WrestleMania 10. But it was Raven who, when he finally became Raven, after all those different aliases and all those different characters, and not only did he create one of the most enduring characters in wrestling history, also one of the most influential characters, because then you had people like Reckless Youth, and you had Tyler Black, all copying or having some sort of, you could see the Raven influence on so many other wrestlers. Yeah, Billy Kidman, Sick Boy, even elements of you see it in Dave Bautista's character when he was Leviathan. The whole goth thing started with, I mean, put it this way, it's so long. I mean, it started when Raven was coming into The Offspring, and he was dressed like grunge. He was dressed like a demented Kurt Cobain. And again, 25 years later, he also, if we can go back to my other podcasting roots, he wrote a Spider-Man comic that was absolutely a definite. I encourage anyone to read it if you're just a Spider-Man fan, because it was just such a groundbreaking story that he told, because it had never been told. The first person that Spider-Man ever fought was the wrestler Crusher Hogan. And he won the $500 stay in the ring with him. It was in the movie, with Tobey Maguire movie, but it was right from the comic book. And of course he won, and the guy that stole the cash ran past him, and he didn't stop him, and he would later go on to kill Uncle Ben. But Scott Levy, Raven, wrote a Spider-Man story from the wrestler's point of view.
It just occurred to me that was used in the first movie.
Yes.
That never occurred to me that was Raven. That's funny.
Yeah. Well, Randy Savage played the character Bonesaw McGraw, but in the comic book, it was Crusher Hogan. And this was back in 1966.
But isn't it a wrestler or isn't it at backstage at wrestling that somebody robs them? Yeah, he robs the promoter. It was kind of so Raven's point of view was kind of used in that first movie.
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's funny.
Yeah, well, what made the story so in the movie, it was he was robbing. In the comic book.
It was the other way around
Yeah.
in the movie. I not to take away from the Raven comic book. It was the other way around in the movie, but they kind of made that lore. They kind of like mixed it up for lore in the original. Oh my God, I forgot Raimi's first name.
Sam Raimi. Yeah.
Thank you. The Sam Raimi trilogy. Continue. Sorry. I'm sorry. It literally just occurred to me.
But the wrestler in the Spider-Man comic books in 1966, he was Crusher Hogan, and he was having anyone can beat him in 5 minutes. He'll give them $500, and that would be Spider-Man's first ever opponent. Scott Levy Raven wrote a whole story about Crusher Hogan, and he wrote it from a wrestler's point of view. So he looked at Crusher Hogan. He was a popular guy, one of the most popular wrestlers in his federation. But then it got old. He got stale. So then he turned to a bad guy. He didn't want to do it, but the crowds were going down. So then he became a bad guy, and fans came up to see him. But then that got old, and he was getting old. But he didn't know how to do anything else but wrestle. So then he said, I'm just going to shoot. And so I'm going to ask people to come into the ring and see if they can beat me for real. And I might get my ass kicked, I might not, but I know I can't do anything else. So this has got to be my life now. And when he started beating people off the street, coming to the ring and beating them, and he started showing off. And the final panel, I'll never forget this because it's such great writing. He said, I've got to make them hate me. I've got to make them boo me. I've got to make them despise me, because the first person that beats me will be, flip to the last page, a hero. And then we see Spider-Man coming into the ring.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. Written by Scott Levy, who turned 55 September 8th. Happy birthday, Raven.
I don't need to read that. Wow, that was powerful. Just wow.
Yeah. September 9th, 1980, exactly 1 month after losing the WWF Tag Team Championship to Pedro Morales and Bob Backlund, the Samoans regained the WWF Tag Team Championship in a tournament by defeating Tony Garea and Rene Goulet. I remember that because I watched it Saturday morning, and Samoans had regained the Tag Team Championship because, honestly, there wasn't any better tag team than the Samoans in 1980.
Pretty much.
Yeah. September 9th, 1991. I mentioned it. What happened a day earlier? Well, in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, Ric Flair defeated Jimmy Powers in his first ever WWF match.
And both would go back to WCW within like a year and a half.
Yep. But it all occurred then. It started there, September 9th, 1991. Ric Flair's first ever match in the WWF. 2 years later, September 9th, 1993. You remember Troy Martin? Well, Shane Douglas on this date won the ECW Heavyweight Championship by forfeit over Tito Santana in Roanoke, Virginia. And I don't think you have to bother looking it up, or there's no tape of this match, because it didn't exist. It never happened. It was a phantom title change. Tito Santana and Shane Douglas were not in Roanoke, Virginia. Shane Douglas was given the ECW heavyweight title, but it wasn't by forfeit over Tito Santana. This make-believe match took place September 9th, 1993, even though it really didn't. September 10th, 1980, landmark date. This is a landmark date in wrestling anyway, Dan, September 10th. 1980, the now late great Harley Race defeated Giant Baba for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. This would end the third and final reign of Giant Baba. Giant Baba would be a 3-time NWA Heavyweight Champion when his career ended, and all 3 of his reigns total 19 days altogether. But this will be the third and final time that he would be the NWA champion, and this would be Harley Race's fifth NWA title win when he defeated Giant Baba. This was it was a notable title change because 1980 was a year of stability. This will be the only world title change from any of the three major federations, WWF, NWA, or AWA. None of the titles would change hands except for this one. This will be the only world title change in the entire year of 1980. In 1981, both the NWA and the AWA titles would change hands multiple times, but in 1980, Harley Race defeating Giant Baba would be the only title change of any of the world titles in the entire year of 1980. Staying on the state, September 10th, yesterday, September 10th, 1988, right here in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Civic Center. This match would change so many different careers. It would be so groundbreaking. I knew it when I saw it then, but still 31 years later, this was huge. The United States Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express, Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, would defeat Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson for the WCW Tag Team Championship. Notable because there was no cameras there. If you weren't there, you just missed it. But one of the people that was there, who came out to ringside before the match even started, NBA Hall of Famer Charles Barkley.
Oh, wow.
Came to ringside, held up the four fingers, huge Four Horsemen fan before the match. Arn Anderson even slid out of the ring and shook Charles Barkley's hand and went right back into the ring to start the match. Not only, Daniel, was this the first time that the United States Tag Team Champions would become the World Tag Team Champions when the Midnight Express would defeat Tully and Arn for the NWA, for the World Tag Team titles. Because unbeknownst to everyone in the crowd, no one had known that Tully and Arn were going to the WWF.
That's right.
But that would be, not only was that the first time the United States Tag Team Champions would also become the World Tag Team Champions, even as great as the Midnight Express were, and Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton was my favorite incarnation of the Midnight Express, that would be their only World Tag Team Championship.
Yeah.
As the Midnight Express. And when that defeat of Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson for the WCW Tag Team title, that will be the last time that Tully and Arn would ever be a tag team again in the NWA. They would go on to the WWF. They would become WWF Tag Team Champions. And when they would return to the NWA, Tully Blanchard had failed a drug test while he was under WWF contract. And Jim Herd, in his infinite wisdom, decided to fire Tully before he even came to the WCW. So he failed a drug test in another federation, so he was fired from the WCW, which he hadn't even worked at yet. So because of that, Tully Blanchard never returned to the WCW, and Tully and Arn would never ever be a tag team again in the NWA or the WCW. It wasn't until yes, it wasn't until last week at the AEW All In that we saw Tully and Arn at the same event at the same time. But 31 years ago, 31 years ago yesterday, all that took place when the Midnight Express defeated Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson. It would also, for all intents and purposes, Dan, signal the end of the Horsemen.
Yeah.
The golden era of the Horsemen as we know it. Ric Flair and Barry Windham obviously would stay in the WCW for a period of time and continue on with the Horseman name, and there would be other members, Sid Vicious, Paul Roma,
no, No.
Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit,
Okay, that's fine.
Mongo, but no. Um, but that would be that would be the last time that Tully and Arn would ever be a tag team in the WCW again, and it would be the first, last, and only time that the Midnight Express, the Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton version, would be champions. Staying on that date, September 10th, another landmark thing. This date in history, Dan, is very famous and infamous. September 10th, 2012, Jerry Lawler died on Raw.
That's right.
7 years ago yesterday, during a taping of Monday Night Raw, live Monday Night Raw, Randy Orton would team up with Jerry Lawler to take on the team of Dolph Ziggler and CM Punk. All four of these men in the same ring together is still just as mind-boggling to me. You put any of those guys in the head. If you told me that Randy Orton would team up with Jerry Lawler, or that Dolph Ziggler would team up with CM Punk, or interchange them, any of those, but and Orton and Lawler were the face team to Ziggler and CM Punk.
Yeah.
After that tag team match, Jerry Lawler would go to the ring, a match that Randy Orton and Jerry Lawler had won. Jerry Lawler would go back behind the desk and he would pass out. And if it wasn't for the look of Titus O'Neil, who recognized it first, left his ring, because Titus O'Neil and was part of the primetime players. He and Daryl, sorry, forget his last name, were wrestling. He went over, and if it wasn't for Doc Sampson, who was at the physician at ringside, and Michael Cole who administered CPR, and if it wasn't for the fact that one of the great hospitals and great heart specialists was close by in proximity to the arena, we may not be talking about Jerry Lawler in present terms. He could be heard on camera snoring because he was completely unconscious. CPR had been administered, but again, if Dr. Sampson hadn't been there, Michael Cole, who knows? But Jerry Lawler suffered a heart attack September 10th, 2012, live at Raw. And as Raw went off the air, it was announced that he was in stable condition. But man, that was an eventful night. Finally, today in pro wrestling history, 1995, Dan, it all began. It all started. Last week, we talked about the premiere of Monday Nitro. Well, it just so happened that time last week when Monday Nitro premiered, Raw was preempted because of the Westminster Dog Show. Well, on this date, September 11th, 1995, Raw was on the air, and for the first time ever, WCW and WWE will go head-to-head on Monday night. Nitro had the debut. They pulled out the big guns. The Nitro saw the debut of Sabu. And he defeated Alex Wright, but when he put Alex Wright through the table, the decision was reversed. So Sabu ended up losing his WCW debut. And the main event was a dream match. A match that I dreamed about, a match that even the After magazines called a dream match because we thought it would never happen. I, for one, did not. It would be the first ever meeting between Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger. Lex Luger, who broke into the sport as he was going to be the WCW, the NWA version of Hulk Hogan. Lex Luger, when he debuted in Florida, was ripping off his shirt like Hulk Hogan. He was going to be the Hulk Hogan of the NWA. Didn't happen that way. Never even became world champion. Well, he became world champion, but not at the expense of Ric Flair. But Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger was on a lot of people's dream matches when WCW, when NWA WWF matches were talked about, who would go against who was always Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger. Was a dream match. Um, One of the After magazines even had the whole match played out, worked out. They wrote the whole match, move for move. But it happened on the first time the WCW go up against Monday Night Raw. And Raw countered with such matches as the Smoking Guns taking on the Brooklyn Brawler and Rad Radford. R.I.P. Louis Spicolli. Dr. Isaac Yankem taking on Scott Taylor, a.k.a. Scotty Too Hottie. And the main event was Shawn Michaels defeating Sid Justice, or Psycho Sid, I apologize. Nitro won that night with a 2.5 rating.
Wouldn't you?
A rating that the current product would kill for right about now.
Yeah.
Also on this date, 1997 in Amarillo, Texas, WrestleFest. This was the card that celebrated 50 years of funk. This was a card that was made famous on the documentary Beyond the Mat. To celebrate Terry Funk, you had ECW wrestlers, WWF wrestlers, indie wrestlers, and wrestlers from Japan all converging on Amarillo to honor Terry Funk. Some of the matches on that card: 50 Years of Funk, Mankind versus Sabu. Balls Mahoney defeated Bubba Ray Dudley. Dory Funk Jr. defeated Rob Van Dam. The ECW TV champion Taz defeated Chris Candido. And the WWF Heavyweight Champion Bret Hart, who got his start in Amarillo, thanks to Terry Funk. Bret Hart defeated Terry Funk. Now, this is almost unheard of for a WWF champion to be appearing in an indie wrestling match, but Bret Hart was there to be and presented before the match presented Terry Funk with a lifetime ECW heavyweight title to be a lifetime hardcore champion. The referee for that match was Dennis Stamp, who was Bret Hart's first ever opponent. And if you remember Beyond the Mat, Dennis Stamp was the man on the trampoline, bouncing up and down with two 10-pound weights, complaining that he's not booked, but he's got to stay in shape. One of my best friends, my friend of 25 years, I saw Beyond the Mat in the theater. And my friend, I've been with this man, again, we've been friends 25 years. We did improv comedy together. We've done more than 500 shows, birthday parties, New Year's Eve, all of Christmases we spend together. I'd never heard him laugh like that. Then watching Dennis Stamp bounce on the trampoline with two 10-pound weights, saying he's got to be ready because he's not booked. And the sight of
Dean Dixon will still reference that to this day.
It's classic. And even during that, as refereeing the match, before the match, if you saw the documentary, he was complaining to Terry why he wasn't booked on this match. And there was 18 matches on this card, but no match for Dennis Stamp. But he did referee the Bret Hart versus Terry Funk match for WrestleFest, 50 Years of Funk. And fans, if you're a fan of this podcast, if you haven't seen Beyond the Mat, even though it's a little dated, again, going on 22 years now, please watch it. It is a must for any wrestling fan. But it took place September 11th, 1997. Staying on landmark dates and landmark matches, September 11th, 2005, TNA Unbreakable. The TNA Unbreakable pay-per-view. We mentioned Scott Levy before. The main event was Raven defeating Rhino and retaining his NWA Heavyweight Championship. See how we came full circle? Raven, NWA. Sure. But the best match on that card may be the best match in TNA history. Some say, well, definitely the match of the year, may have been the match of the decade. The triple threat match for the X Division title between Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles. Almost 15 years later, it's still the greatest match, maybe the greatest match in TNA history. Those three put on a clinic, and they even brought that same match to the ECW arena when TNA went on the road and wrestled here in Philly. And those three didn't lose a step. But on this date, 14 years ago, the best match in TNA history took place with Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles. AJ Styles came out the winner of that match, defeating Christopher Daniels. Samoa Joe remained undefeated, but the three of those men made wrestling special on that day. And the last landmark that happened on this particular day, Dan, happy 54th birthday today for Mr. Paul E. Dangerously Heyman.
The man who still cuts a better promo than half the roster.
Yes.
Or maybe two-thirds of the roster? It's over half.
Yeah.
It's over half at this point. That's a good wrestling historian. And I will say this. Yes, Harry, I know WCW is dead. Maybe it's because I'm going to bring this back around into our last discussion, which something you teased earlier, because we're professionals. I know what I'm doing here. You always talk about how bad wrestling was until 1996, 97. I don't feel that's true. And maybe that's because Raw and SmackDown is not great a lot of the times now. And maybe it's because it's been 25 or 6 years. My God. Can't believe I could say that. Since some of these shows, we're going on 20 year. We're hitting 20-year anniversaries to all of this. That perhaps is not bad. I feel a lot of it is more enjoyable than we remember.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly gonna not be as good, debatable, as when Monday Night Raw gets rolling, when Steve Austin is on a roll and all that stuff. But a lot of the times Nitro is better. And that's funny considering we look at it now and we talk about how we don't want these legends still on the show. And then we see Flair and Anderson still having matches. It's still having great matches. History repeats itself all the time. Everybody talks about how WWE is going to die and wrestling is going to die. And there's always circles back around. It always will. There's going to be, will it be as high as the last golden era of wrestling? Probably not, but there will always be a resurgence. And we could be on the precipice of it now. With that being said, you mentioned earlier that the ratings thing, and we kill for ratings these days, and I know the WWF or WWE would have killed for those ratings because they brought back Stone Cold Steve Austin for Raw at a sold-out Madison Square Garden, and the ratings still dropped. This was the Raw against the first Monday Night Football of the year, and I think it was 22% down from last year's show against Monday Night Football for the first week, right? But it's 15% drop for this year. And we say that it's still 2 million viewers. It's 2.1 million viewers still. And that's still a lot. But when you get done talking about the Monday Night Wars, when there was a 5 on one show and a 4 on the other, and how many millions of people that is compared, that's still a lot, man. And like I said, it was a sold out show. It was a great show. Both of the shows are very entertaining and very well written this week. Well written. The crowd, I will say this, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
Say what you want about Steve Austin and things, 20 years later, nobody gets popped like that. Still to this day, it still blows me away because you talk about crowd reactions and nobody reacting and nobody caring. That glass breaks. It still blows me away. I'll never get over that.
No, and I will always, when people go who was a bigger superstar, Austin or Rock, I will always put Austin over Rock because it was Austin who made Rock. Not that Rock didn't make himself, but it wasn't until his feud with Rock, because Austin was already there. Rock had to catch up to him. So the glass breaking is what made Stone Cold a bigger, longer superstar than Hogan.
Yeah.
Because no one gets that pop, like you just said, now, still. It's going on 20 years now. And it was Stone Cold that made the last time it was that big was when Stone Cold, and before that it was Hogan. But Hogan didn't get the kind of reaction that Stone Cold did. Hogan didn't get that type of visceral gutter, that explosion, you know. That yeah, you said when the glass breaks, it's like setting off a powder keg. It's just, and watching, even you watch an old, and the fact that it would come out of nowhere,
That's
they wouldn't start. Yeah, they wouldn't start the show with that. It could be during a match, or it could be during an interview. Then bam, and it just like the eruption. Nothing does it like that, and the fact that Austin can still do it. I know that's why they brought him back, because it was the first Monday Night Football game of the year, and unfortunately for WWF, the first Monday Night Football game of the year was a damn good one.
Yeah,
Maybe the best I've seen in about 10 years. So that didn't help because I wasn't watching. I stopped watching Raw for a bit at a time just to watch the game for against two teams that I don't give a flying crap about. But that's how good the game was. Yes, their wrestling has always done this. There has always been ebbed and flowed, and there's always been the peaks and valleys when it comes to professional wrestling. Especially now that we've got so many different venues and avenues to watch wrestling, and there is DVR, and there is streaming, and there is internet, and almost impossible to gauge how many people are watching a wrestling match at a certain time. It's just something that we have to take into account. But with this fall coming, with more wrestling shows now going to be on this fall than at any time since the Monday Night Wars, you're going to see that resurgence because something's going to pop, someone's going to pop, an angle is going to get everyone's attention. There's going to be mainstream focus on all these because we have wrestling not just on USA, but on TNT and the other cable outlets. So we're going to see a resurgence. Not going to come right away because we're going to fall over each other when the first ratings come out for AEW or the first ratings come out for NXT, and they're not where they thought it was going to be. Or they all started off like this.
Yeah.
And
the Monday Night Wars rating went like this. Harry can draw a line on screen. Went like that. And then that. For both shows.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to pop first? We were talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. I call it the Sting pop, the Steve Austin pop, the Jericho pop, Hogan pop. Who gets it first? Somebody AEW, or do you think WWE wakes up? And then I have a counterpoint to whatever you're going to say anyway. Don't let that scare you. Answer my question.
Who would I think is going to get a pop first? As long as they don't mess with anything, it's going to be NXT. They have the best wrestling of any show that we have now. I can only point to one or two different people on AEW that would actually get something, get a crowd response. Obviously, the best thing on all four shows, Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, and NWA, is Maxwell Jacob Freeman.
Yeah.
He is far and away the best thing on any of those shows. How he's going to play in the mainstream is what I'm anxious to see. But he's what should come out of this as the premier star out of all of this. NXT has the best shows, they have the best wrestling, they have the best matches, and they have the best angles. So they should get the rub from being the best product or the best produced show out of all four. NWA's got absolutely nothing to lose. So they're playing with house money. So they can they remind me of the old Dave Letterman show. He just, because nobody's watching, so let's just do this, or let's put this guy out there, let's try something, and look where he got him. Then he's cutting edge. So my money's on NXT though, making the biggest splash.
Something just occurred to me while we're talking about this, and we'll end the show on these thoughts. One of the constants, I'm not talking about his character. I'm not talking about morale-wise. I'm not talking about personal. I'm talking about as a runner of a show. The one constant to anybody who came up head-to-head with WWF and Vince McMahon was Vince McMahon. Whether it was the NWA resurgence in the 80s, when they were when Crockett got it and gobbled up everybody, and there was the big two after AWA shut down, Vince McMahon. When the Monday Night War started and Nitro went head-to-head, Vince McMahon stuck it out. And I'm also not talking about the performers. Obviously, without the puzzle pieces, the puzzle can't be complete. But I'm talking about at that end, Vince stuck it out and was able to figure it out and win in the end. With the XFL coming up and his age and him not being 100% anymore and him not even having his head in wrestling anymore, it's going to be interesting to see if Triple H and Stephanie can fight a war like Vince is and come out on top. Because, again, all the things I mentioned before, we can argue about what a POS he is on certain situations, what he's done to wrestlers, what they've done to help, what they've done to hurt. I'm talking strictly about running a show and promoting a show. There is a reason why he's always come out on top. And those factors might be what is different this time. Whatever happened, I do want to say just a little PS to this, because I want to get your thoughts on what I just said. Whoever wins, buy the WWE Network, so I have everything still in the library. That is my main concern. I don't care what happens. That needs to still be on. So if it becomes AEW on demand, I don't really give a rat's ass what they call it. That needs to stay. I just want to make it clear. But yes, that was the factor that might change is Vince McMahon. This might be the first time where Vince is not on the front lines anymore. Am I talking out of my butt, or does it matter, or is he still going to be there? You think? What do you think? You've been around longer. You've seen it all. You're old.
I am. Yeah, just get to the point, Dan. Yeah, so you're a fossil. You've seen the beginning of time, so you would know. I had not thought of that. You are correct, sir. That's a Johnny Carson reference because I'm old.
I got Johnny Carson. He's right there behind me. I know it's actually right there. It's right there where my finger is. I
see that. I love it. Yes, this will be the first time that Vince can't give it all his full attention. While I still think things will be ultimately run by him because of the XFL, I don't think he'll be able to give his full attention to. This is Triple H and Stephanie's show. If they give half as much time to the main roster they do the NXT, I think they'll be okay. Obviously, like I said, NXT is the best produced show on any show. They have the best wrestler. They have the best angles. They do the best storytelling. They have the best product. How it plays on a national stage, nothing should change. Absolutely nothing should change. They should keep everyone they have there exactly how they have it. And no one should be moved up. No one should be moved down or taken off. Keep it the way it is.
Sure.
Because you can tell that's Triple H's baby. When he puts his mind and everything, his resources in it, and NXT is now this global brand from here in London, and it's the best wrestling show that there is. But I think it will come out on top because of Triple H. With AEW, it's the people that have the money. The people that know wrestling don't have the money. The people that have the money don't know wrestling. AEW has more familiar faces that can hit with a mainstream audience. Putting the belt on Jericho was a great idea, especially if you want to get to start a wrestling organization that you want to be seen on a national scale. Chris Jericho is your best bet for champion, and obviously people are going to be tuning in for the first show just to see him and see what they'll do. It will be without a Monday Night War without Vince McMahon at the helm. It will just be if it doesn't happen. If there is a winner that's not the WWE in this, it will signal the times that they are a changing. That's a Bob Dylan reference because I'm very old. But it will also enter in a new era of mainstream professional wrestling, which we haven't had since the territorial days. The main thing is, Dan, the ultimate winner in all of this is us, the wrestling fan.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's better than it used to be because, I mean, sure, we had. I used to watch all the WCW shows from when I was a real little kid to the very end live, and record everything the WWF was doing and watch it later. But with the advent of on demand and DVRs, and it just makes the access even easier. That as long as you have the time, us adults, we got to manage our time a little better. However, this could be a very good thing.
Cannot wait.
Yeah, no, I can't. Well, 1 month, man. We're almost there. And November, I have tickets to Full Gear AEW. So I will be going to the AEW PPV at the Baltimore Arena, the place I said I'd never go again. Yeah, I'm going.
Just when you thought you were out, they pull you back in.
Our true enemies have not yet shown their face. Where the children play with their toys. I know it's a different movie, but that was for you.
Thank you.
With that, before I go into a diabetic coma, I think that's what happened in Godfather 3. It's time to go and go away until next week. And I swear between now and the 27th, I will get Joe Gacy. I will do my best to get Jace Gosian? Joe Gacy. Wow, it's time to go. Greg, where can people follow you and listen to your other podcasts?
Thank you, Dan. You can follow me at Craig Ligons, CraigLiggeons, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. If you like that comic book stuff, you can also follow me in my other podcast, Comic Book Gurus, on WMMR.com. It's also available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and wherever fine podcasts are sold for free.
Sold for free. Maybe if they were sold, I wouldn't be so miserable. Now, follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83, the HIAC Talk Radio Network. We can find the Wrestling Podcast. Obey the Puck has a new episode. Stadium Journey. It's all there. Go to all social media platforms. Type in HIAC Talk Radio. Listen to the podcast on Apple, iTunes, and Google by typing in the VOC Nation Radio Network, or just go to the BradyHicks.com to listen to all of the HIAC Talk Radio Network podcasts. For Craig Ligons and Joe Gacy, eventually, maybe, probably, I don't know, and Harry Barnett's watching somewhere. I am the above average comedian, Dan Calcico. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.